I'm here to talk about open source, and I changed the title a little bit here from managing your repo to more managing your project. I'm going to be a little bit more holistic here and go a little wider on things. So, what we're going to cover is kind of the responsibility of what project maintainers do for a large project, how AI helps some of these problems that we face in these projects, and then some of the plans that we as a project are approaching as we grow into this kind of AI revolution thing that everybody's hyped up about. And most importantly, just kind of driving home the point that open source is, I think, the future of software, really, especially in use cases like analytics. And I'm going to just kind of give you the theory behind that. So what we won't go deep on in this topic, I'm sorry if I'm bursting any bubbles here, but we're not going to be talking about developing AI tools or writing code with AI or blogs or content or any of our fun AI-driven product features that we have, like, Preset has some cool AI stuff on top of Superset. All of this stuff's worthy of a whole series of talks, but this one is kind of about maintainer tools and focusing on that. For everything else, I encourage you to adopt whatever practice makes sense for your team to build whatever you're looking to build. It's a wild time right now, and there's a lot going on. But what I do want to share today are my opinions and experiences in managing a large open source project, which is Apache Superset. I want to be transparent about some of the trust issues I have with these tools, as well as some of the things I'm excited about. Have we learned every trick in the book? No, we haven't. Heck no. But I do want to share a lot of the stuff we've tried and learned so far. And as my mom once said, if you buy a cookbook and you get one single recipe out of it, then you made a good investment. And I'm hoping this talk gives somebody a couple new tools and things to try. And I hope to get the same out of you guys. So join me in the lounge afterward. I will be there. So first off, I work on Apache Superset. That's the project that I get this experience from. In a nutshell, it's a BI platform. It's open source. It's enterprise ready business intelligence. It competes with all sorts of more proprietary tools. It's the last mile in your data stack. It's the visualization layer, and it comes naturally to anyone that knows how to write SQL. It's super cool. You should try it. I'm happy to give anyone a tour if we have time later in the lounge. You can even try it on Preset for free for 5 users forever. There's my product pitch. Had to do it. But the point is, it's a big project. It has a lot of GitHub stars, which is a good metric to measure any GitHub repo by. It's the #1 ASF project currently and growing every day. It's the #1 tool in the modern data stack as far as open source goes, at least according to OSS Insight, which is a great site you should check out. There's a plug. And right now it's currently number 163 in all repos on GitHub by stars, which is saying something, and it's going up notch by notch, I'm happy to say. We're also very big by Slack members. By no means the biggest Slack workspace in the world, but it's bigger than ASF's and it's growing every day. Lots of people. So it's all of this stuff points that there's a lot to wrangle, and this leads to a lot of work for maintainers. But what kind of stuff do we have to do to take care of a project at this scale and keep people engaged and happy and humming along smoothly in the development of this project? Well, there's all these different time sinks here. I've kind of tried to break it down to the basics. Each one of these things you see on screen is something that just needs to be kept up and swept up in order to drive engagement, improve developer experience, and keep the project moving forward faster and more smoothly. Some of this stuff gets pretty technical, some of it not so much. And when you look at this list, I would be curious if I could see a show of hands or something. How many of these things do you think could be aided day to day by the use of all these new AI tools? I think basically all of them, except maybe the last one. And, we're working on that. But I'll tell you what we've learned on most of these so far to encounter the problems you do. #1, let's talk about Slack. These are some stats that we have on our particular Slack network. If you look at the top one, you can see that we have more responses than posts. And on the surface, that seems great. People are talking. But if you look at this metric on the bottom, which, take it with a grain of salt, we're not seeing as many responses or questions answered as we'd like to see. Basically, there's an imbalance of volunteers. The volunteers that know the answers to questions and actually stop to answer them doesn't seem to grow in proportion with the success of a project as it grows. You get more people asking questions. So we need AI to help us restore this balance. So the way we're tackling this as a project is by using AI chatbots. Surprise, surprise. But what we're actually doing is diversifying our approach here. We're using three of them currently, Kappa, Threado, and Run LLM. There's a few others that are out there that we're assessing. And if anybody has any recommendations, I'm all ears. So these are kind of in, I guess we'd say, a long-term bake-off, but it's almost case by case. All three of them are trained on the same corpus of information, whether it's our docs, our blogs, our code base, the wiki, readmes, all of this good stuff. And if you follow any of the questions that people ask in our Ask AI channel, which you can join by clicking that QR code, or not clicking it, but scanning it, you'll find that experiences vary. A different bot will answer a different question differently. And having that diversity of bot opinion has generally worked out well. So I would kind of recommend this. But another lesson learned here perhaps is that you don't want to let these bots run wild on Slack. We found that when they were able to answer questions in any given channel, sometimes automatically, sometimes when triggered, it actually detracted from human interaction, that people were seeing an AI answer, not stopping to look whether it's good or bad, but they're just assuming it's a solved problem and moving on to the next question. So I would say keep these bots contained. We don't want, the goal as maintainers is to keep people engaged and not get annoyed by the automation we build. So each of these three bots actually has its own kind of little bit of value it adds. Looking at Kappa.ai, which is probably the favorite, I would say, in terms of quality answers. If I'm going to plug something here, it's highly consolidated in terms of the feedback it gives you. Like it groups the questions that are asked into common threads that you can then use to inform your docs. It points at all the references it uses from the training corpus of data. That also helps you kind of revisit those most important things and make sure they're up to date and have all the detail they need. Threado has a lot of other stuff similarly. I think that the best value it has here is the background screenshot, that it shows you the questions that are asked where it had missing data. So again, this really informs your community on where we need to boost things like documentation. And Threado also, I should say, adds a lot of maintenance tools that are non-AI, like scheduled workflows for Slack messages and things like that. Super cool. And Run LLM is the newest one, and this also kind of gives you sort of a macro view on what topics are being answered by which chunk of training information is available to it. So again, all of this stuff not only helps your users, but really helps those that are maintaining your project documentation know where to invest. So that's a really valuable thing. And now issues are another thing we always tackle as maintainers. And as you can see by this chart, the problem highlighted here is that issues tend to open as fast or faster than they get closed. We're always trying to kind of weed that garden and catch up, and it's a lot of work. So the thing we've added that works for the superset community is a product called Dosu. And you, again, train it on all of the wiki and PRs and code base and issues and discussions and so forth. And it answers questions on your GitHub issues and GitHub discussions. And as you can see from this little screenshot, we've had a lot of happy responses. This is really great for maintainers because they're getting the answer they need, and they are, in fact, closing their issues on their own. So maintainers don't have to come along and answer everything, which has been a really big help. And people that probably wouldn't get help from maintainers are actually coming back due to this bot engagement. Again, it's more about engagement than just getting stuff done. So the fact that people get answers quickly and are paid attention to, even if it's not by a human, has been a huge help for the community. And as a result, we get charts like this that are exactly what you want to see. We're dropping in the ranks of number of open issues among various projects in the data stack. And the one on the right there is actually showing that our responsiveness on issues, the time to response is dropping significantly over the last year. And that this all goes to lower our overhead. Some of it's hard work, but some of it's automated. It's a mix, but it's working. And the next similar problem is, of course, pull requests. And as you can see here, this hasn't changed much, but there's a reason. We haven't added a lot of automation here, and that's because humans matter a lot. We're kind of hitting the brakes on automatic PR reviews for the moment. And I'm curious if anyone here has differing opinions on whether we should or shouldn't. But the idea is that code quality isn't everything. You don't want to skip on mentorship. You're trying to engage people in your community and bring them back for a second contribution. You want your senior people to interact with your junior people. You want to get to know the capabilities of your community members better and actually have those conversations. So I think humans still matter here. But that said, we are investigating various tools. Some of these have problems, I think, with just like kind of writing code in a large code base in general. You have to be aware of all the linting rules, best practices, tech debt, refactors and migrations that are underway. And these tools aren't always aware of all the little utilities and modules available in a large code base. And they don't, necessarily welcome and teach new contributors. So I guess the big message here is that your number one goal as a maintainer is not just to merge code, it's to bring people back. So we're a little bit shy about going totally crazy with PR review bots right now. But here's a little tip of the day. If you're trying to review a bunch of PRs, what you can do is use your favorite LLM tool. I don't know if it's Claude or ChatGPT or whatever, but if you go to an issue, just type .diff at the end of it, and it actually gives you a very nicely formatted diff, and you can copy and paste that whole diff blob into an LLM, and it'll give you a pretty decent code review looking for missed tests or unnecessary complexity, things like that. We're also able to move PRs and issues a lot faster by AI-based labeling automation. And this is because we have certain more mechanical automations that label things based on code path, like translations and so forth. But this actually can label stuff based on feature area or the type of change that's happening, which is really handy for those that want to just go look for certain things and work on them. On the documentation tip, as I mentioned, there's a lot of ways you can use AI to figure out what to write. But what we need to do on our project that's a little bit held back by the bureaucracy angle I mentioned earlier is adding these AI tools to our website. And the ASF in particular is very sensitive about having DPAs in place and sponsorship, partnership kind of arrangements. So there's a little bit of a roadblock, but we think that in time, as some of this gets through all the red tape, we're going to have better search tools and better chat within those docs and automatic authoring of some of these documentation that's really going to help drive the project forward. We're also using AI to generate reports. And this is a great way. Not everybody can keep on top of a repo that moves really fast. So using AI to generate kind of a change log of the month or the week is a really useful thing. You can do this with automated scripts that kind of grab all the merged PRs, drop their descriptions into a file and kind of distill that into a narrative. Or in this case, it's again, actually Dosu. They're kind enough to provide these on demand for us. And it's very helpful to our audience. Other stuff we're working on right now, I think we're going to be showing some of this soon, is automatic translations. That's such a burden for maintainers. Whenever the code base changes, you have to update translations along with it. This is a very automatable thing, especially if you have a corpus of existing translations that just need to be modified into other languages. Automatic release notes will definitely cut back a lot of time spent, as well as all these little utility scripts and things like that. I mentioned we're the number 163 repo in all of GitHub. I only know that because AI helped write a script to figure that out. So what's coming next with all of this AI stuff? There's a proliferation of these little tools and techniques that I'm talking about here. But what prevents AI from just making more noise everywhere? Well, these bots are coming and they are going to be making a lot more noise. We've already seen a few bots show up on our repo that are able to just show up. Nobody really invited them. Nobody added them. This is interesting. Just like people, you can comment very openly on an open repo. So we fully expect to see more of these bots showing up on Slack and GitHub and everywhere, whether they're invited or not. The biggest risks of that being noise, where too many bots drown out human interaction, just like I was mentioning on Slack. Or worse, I fear misinformation, where bad answers can leave a permanent record and get picked up by bots. This is something that Max was alluding to earlier that I kind of think of as the Ouroboros problem of the internet, where it starts to kind of consume itself, at least with these kind of foundational LLMs. So I get a little pessimistic here, but there's a use case, for example, right now where this thing on the right is an answer that came via Gemini, and it pulled up It's basically trained, we found out, on some misinformation that was put on a documentation website by a hallucination of another LLM. Who knows which one? But I think this all turns us from authors into proofreaders. And I think that's a new burden that kind of balances out the new opportunity we have from all of these tools. So don't get me wrong, I don't want to be pessimistic. I use this stuff every day for engineering or life in general, but we have to be very cautious about how we treat this information, and make sure that we're putting correct information out there into the world as project maintainers, whether it's on Slack or issues or our documentation. So how do we do that as we're scaling all of this? Basically, two short answers. Human oversight. It's a lot quicker to just delete bad comments or give these bots feedback than it is to go and answer some deep technical question. The bots still save time, even if it's a little risky in terms of information quality. Better yet, these agentic AI kind of workflows are going to be very useful, whether we build them with LangGraph or make.com or some other tool. There's a million of them, I think. But we need bots to validate our bots and curate and consolidate and summarize this information and kind of get to the truth of it. Some of those applications might be bot collaboration, where, what if we have 3 bots giving an answer? Can it be consolidated into one nugget of truth by a 4th bot? Probably. Truth evaluation. Can some of these bots do research to figure out what's truthful or not, and give these bots their thumbs up or thumbs down comment to help them along? Or consensus, boiling things down into threads that have little overviews, either available on demand or upon issue resolution, just to kind of make things concise. Augmentation, what I mean here is adding things like links to docs and issues and discussions taking place elsewhere, meetings you can attend, stuff like that. That'll really drive and grow engagement. And then closing the loop. We see this a lot where a bot will get a quality answer on an issue, and it might have a one-line fix that somebody could open as a PR, but they don't necessarily. So of course, the next trick is going to be getting the bots to actually do that. So I've rambled a lot about the things that these bots are doing for us and with us, but why is it that open source wins? There's a lot of to-dos and stuff to be figured out yet, so why am I so confident that open source is the future? Well, it's a couple of things. One is the freedom, as in liberty, of course, that comes with open source in general, but all of that bot interaction is going to be 100% easier with open source. AI tools have everything they need to thrive in the open, whether it's access to the code base, the documentation, the community forum, and all of that stuff to make a rich training experience for the bots. And of course, there are minimal concerns in open source about compliance issues or credentials needed to get to this information, or VPNs and things like that. All of the content is instantly accessible, which is a huge advantage. And on top of that, all of these bots have public write access in general. They can just show up and make a comment on the thread without ever having to be added, behind the wall of a garden. I guess you could say a walled garden, mixed metaphor, but the bot can just show up. Then there's the cost factor. For open source projects, most of these tools are free, amazingly. Pretty much all of them that I've talked with are willing to provide some sort of free open source plan. And that's amazing. Neither Superset nor Preset nor the ASF are paying for most of these tools. Companies are happy to donate them, sponsoring this kind of public service. And in return, they get a public proof of concept that demonstrates effectiveness and drives their business, which seems like a pretty fair trade to me. So this gives open source the advantage of being able to experiment with the newest tools, the best tools, and as you saw in the Slack bots, even multiple tools, kind of having that redundancy and the ability to kind of get more information that we can consolidate into more truth. So it gives you a minimum spend, minimum procurement time, and all the latest toys. So this leads to a poorly formatted slide of the idea that open source is going to be more able to have a bot army supporting it, where proprietary tools are going to be likely left behind because they have to pay for these things. They have to do more setup work. The bots are not going to have access to all the people, all the information, and all the ancillary things that help make the bot experience better. So hopefully you'll be able to get a tip or trick out of some of this. I'd love to hear your opinions about how we should handle things like PRs. What should we should do differently? How can we handle the signal to noise ratio of AI having free and open access to our code repositories? Meanwhile, I encourage you to check out the repo itself and see what the bots are doing firsthand. There's the link to it, as well as the docs if you want to try to get it up and running. And you can join us on Slack. Here's the link. Thank you all for listening to this, and I hope it helps.